Alright, Economics Volume 4. Kind of a response video to Nick Zeus and Vital Fines. Yeah, it's going to be a little complicated. Okay, Nick is basically saying, okay, there's certain services we ought to guarantee, and then everything else should be a free market. But that just doesn't deal with any of the realities, okay? Free market by what standard? Snake oil's okay, pollute the environment's okay, exploiting desperation around the world is okay. You know, it just doesn't make any sense to say free. Okay, I can give you the Hearst example again, but yeah, so what if I go into a market and I got $100 billion in my back pocket? I could just wipe out every bit of competition. I can make deals with every provider, every store. I can get my stuff in, their stuff out. I mean, you've got to regulate the commerce. If you don't regulate it, people will cheat all over the place. I mean, it's just totally unrealistic to use words like free market, because they don't mean anything. Because it just, who's going to pay the price for all the fraud? And then again, even in your example, how are you going to fix bankruptcy? All right, let's get rid of bankruptcy. What are we going to, so are we really going to deal with it in a responsible manner? So if a company goes bankrupt, are we going to go back to the shareholders who bailed out the day before and say, no, you're liable? Are we going to go to the kids of the little rich bastards who invested in the money and say, you got to pay the debt? Because we know who's paying for bankruptcy now. Consumers. All right, it's just a tax on consumption. Because it's a tax on doing business. Is that you're going to get ripped off. And you're going to have to do business that way. You're not going to make it in the business environment if you don't give other businesses credit. And so you're always going to be vulnerable to their bankruptcy. And in that circumstance, in that environment that we create, you know, that's what it ends up being. It's a tax on consumption. You know, so anyway, I think it's just totally unrealistic to talk about anything called a free market. It just doesn't make any sense. It has to be regulated, and the argument is how much regulation. And so then bending it towards Vital Fines, which is basically just saying, well, it's all spending, good spending. And of course, I don't, you know, who would agree that all spending is good spending? But yeah, we can point to different things. I can point to the welfare to the rich, and you can point to the welfare to the poor. You know, you can point to a lazy government employee. I can point to the CEO of Halliburton. I mean, it just doesn't, you know, there's no point in saying, yeah, too much spending is bad. Yeah, of course, too much bad spending, especially inefficient spending, yeah, let's get rid of it. But the problem is, who's designing the system again? You know, I am a liberal, but you know, I have voted Democrat, but I do it holding my nose, because if I had the power, I would fire every government employee in the United States. Okay, because they have abused their power, their union power. I would fire every teacher in the United States because they've abused their power. I would fire every police officer in the United States because they've abused their friggin' union power. They're not fighting for fairness anymore, these unions. They're fighting for all kinds of protections, and it's just ludicrous. If I was dictator, I would make the word tenure a crime to even utter. You couldn't even utter the word tenure, okay? If you did, you had to pay a fine on the spot, a $10 fine, every time you said the word tenure, okay? Because nobody should have immunity. Nobody should have it. It's just a ludicrous concept, and we see what it does. It just creates horrible waste in systems. I mean, we've got in this town, we've got 90-year-old school teachers. What's the point in that? It's ludicrous. It just, you know, and then look what it does to judges, giving them immunity from accountability. What is that? It's nonsense. Government now has immunity. Your government, your sovereign, your public servants can now violate your constitutional rights. They can violate your fundamental constitutional rights, and they can do it with malicious intent, okay, as merely an attack against you, deliberately, on purpose. And you can't do a damn thing about it. I mean, that's how grotesque the system has gotten. So yeah, if you want to rag on government, I'm all for it. But you know, let's do it in some sort of manner where there's some sort of acknowledgement of the real world circumstance. The real world circumstances is that your special interest isn't any better than those other jackass special interests. I mean, if you're going to tie responsible fiscal behavior to, well, let's give huge subsidies to the richest people in the world. Let's give them tax breaks on top of it. I mean, by some kind of dopey trickle-down theory, well then forget it. No sale. I'm not going there. I'm not gonna pull that lever. If that's the price of a balanced budget, is giving the money to the richest people in the world, forget it. But yeah, obviously deficit spending was a really bad idea. Both parties are guilty of it. And it was just, there's so many ingredients to this disaster. And the whole notion of deficit spending doesn't make any sense whatsoever for a government. A government, look, let's take the most responsible case of debt. And that would be maybe the purchase of a home. And the only reason why people do that, the only reason why people buy it on debt is because they don't have a choice. Okay, it's because they don't have the cash. And if they wait to save the cash because of their human mortality, they're probably going to be half dead. Okay, and so they're not going to be able to get the full value out of the house because they're going to be half dead. And secondarily, the whole period of time while they're saving for the house, they would have to pay rent. And the rent would be almost or more than a mortgage. So they are losing a tremendous amount of money by not incurring debt, because debt is the only practical solution to that problem, is to take on debt. All right, so in that scenario, debt can make sense. But in every other scenario, it's not going to make sense, and it doesn't make sense for a non-mortal government. I mean, if government took on debt and paid it back in 3 years, maybe it could make sense. All right, especially like, let's say tomorrow somebody comes up with a cure for cancer, but it needs another $100 billion in development money. Okay, it would make sense if government said, okay, let's spend the money. And even though we don't have the money, we're in the middle of the depression, it would be a good expenditure. It would be a rational expenditure because we're going to get huge productivity gains in the future from it. So that would make sense, but it would only make sense if they paid off the debt in a few years. And we never pay the debt off. We are still basically carrying the debt from World War II. That's the practical fact. In this country, we never paid down the World War II debt. And that's basically what we carried into this future. And we've just piled more on top of it now. And it's just, you can't function in that environment. So we're just paying a huge amount of money to the richest people in the world, the people holding that debt. And it's just completely irresponsible. But anyway, and then when it comes to the waste in government, like I said, there's huge waste in the fact that we guarantee too much for government employees, and they get way too shiftless and way too lazy. Okay, and that's the inefficiency of government. So every time somebody points to the postal service or this or that or some other service the government can't provide, I would also remind you the government, our government, built the Hoover Dam. Our government landed on the friggin' moon. All right, and so it's only a recent development where government's become completely incompetent. All right, and it's done so because of unions. Because our servants have now become our tyrants. The bureaucrats have a union, have a powerful voting bloc, and they guarantee that they get served. And that's the bullshit here. They're running us, we're not running them. But even in that worst case scenario, that waste, I mean, if I'm paying some guy $60,000 and he's only doing $30,000 worth of work, well, that makes a hell of a lot more sense than paying a CEO of Halliburton, $10 million plus another 7% dividend to all the shareholders in the company. I mean, that waste is more egregious than the employee who's providing some service, but he's actually taking care of his family. He's buying a house. He's part of the real economy. He's not having his toilet gold-plated. He's not wasting human energy, with 15 people, building a private garden in his backyard perpetually, or maintaining it, or some other labor that's just a complete waste that there's no social good out of. The part of the economy that government employee is part of is actually efficient, okay, because that's infrastructure. That's building better roads and better infrastructure and better internet access and all the things that we all use. Better food distribution. He's investing in things we all use, while that rich bastard is investing in things that nobody else will gain any value from. It's completely wasted labor. And he's using our money, essentially, to buy that waste labor. So, how much time do I got? Yeah, running out of time anyway. Yeah, there's really so much to get into here. This is, the economy it's a game, but it's not that simple. It does take engineering, and the real problem is that we don't have anybody to do it. It's like the original Constitution. A group of 20 or 30 guys could write a Constitution, all right? A society full of special interests aren't going to write a Constitution, okay? Because majorities will take advantage, okay? They'll write it to their preferences, and that's the bullshit here, and that's the problem with this economy, is how do we fix it when only special interests are writing it, okay? It's only the special interests that have the pen. And as long as they're the ones that have the pen writing the rules, then you will have a tax code this thick, okay? Because it's going to be full of racketeering. That's all it is. It's that thick because it's a racket. It isn't designed to efficiently distribute the tax burden. It's designed to create 5 zillion loopholes. All right. Now it's enough said. Thank you very much. Till next time.